St. Paul's Mark readers, chapter 15 of Mark and the death of Christ. Roman courts opened at first light. So Mark has the note here, as soon as it was morning. That's when the chief priests went. That's why they went so early. It's because that's when the Roman courts opened. But notice, this is all he says to anyone. He will scream out Psalm 22 shortly, but he doesn't speak to anyone throughout this whole ordeal in Mark, except for this line here, "You have said so." Pilate and others notice that he's not replying to any of the charges. Have you no answer? Jesus made no further answer. As he continues to not reveal himself. He's not going to tell you who he is. Mark has made this point from the beginning of the gospel. Instead, you have to make up your mind who he is. He's not going to tell you. You have to decide. No answer. No answer. Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. Now, the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas instead, and have Jesus crucified. Now, that strikes us as odd sometimes. The crowd seemed to love Jesus a minute ago, and now the chief priests are able to turn the crowd on him. Well, it's probably not that surprising. See, it wouldn't be that hard to do. It would be easy for the people to side with the religious rulers over the oppressive Romans. If the oppressive Romans suggest a solution, that is, free Jesus, and the chief priests suggest a solution is, no, you want Barabbas, the freedom fighter. Well, the people are not going to side with the oppressive Romans. That's not going to happen. So this is not actually that unusual that the crowd switched over and asked for Barabbas. Like I said, the people may very well have viewed Barabbas as a freedom fighting hero. However, he was a criminal. And what happens is that the criminal is freed and the innocent, Jesus, is condemned. This incident with Barabbas is symbolic of us. We're the one that should have been killed. We're the one that deserved death, and he is the one that takes our place. Jesus is mocked now by the centurions. He's beaten. They scream, "Hail, King of the Jews." He is mocked. They clown him as a king, but even in our own lives, and I'm not just saying look at others and judge other people's, but in our own lives, his rule continues to be mocked. How often do we really treat him as king? We'd probably do better off if we act like he was a true king more often, but sometimes we don't regard him as king at all. So when we read passages like this, be careful to not just judge other people or judge the centurions or go, man, those Romans, we are Pilate, we are Barabbas, we are the Romans. The crucifixion, the myrrh was some sort of liquid that helped dull pain that could be used at that time. He didn't take it, wanted to experience the full weight of the crucifixion. He was told to carry his cross. This was the cross beam. Is right. You had this piece of the cross. That's what they mean here by cross. And then there was the vertical post, which was, the vertical beam was already in the ground. The body would have been fixed onto this cross beam on the ground and then hoisted, lifted up onto the vertical beam. Again, we see the mocking continue. A sign written, "The King of the Jews," and this is our King. We do not have a king that rides gloriously into battle, defeating enemies. Not yet, anyway. Not yet. This is our King. Currently, our King takes often, if not always, takes on a stance that looks like it's defeated. This is our King. Someday he will ride into battle gloriously. Not yet. We see again the charge of destroying the temple, hearkening back to chapter 13. the chief priests say he saved others and he cannot save himself, which is true. They don't realize how true it is. If he would save others, he must die. What Jesus is doing in chapter 15 is what we had seen always from the beginning of Mark chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus was willing to go out into the desert, which we had said was a place of judgment. And here then, he is being judged. So then it happens, the death of Jesus. The 6th hour had come, which is about 9. There was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, which is about noon. This harkens back to maybe Exodus 10, when there was the plague of darkness. Amos 8:9, a prophecy about the end of the world. We see him scream out Psalm 22. We see the temple veil torn in two. What he's doing here, he's drawing the whole history of Israel into himself. That is, as we just said, the desert was a place of judgment. In Exodus, the people were so rebellious against God that he couldn't stay near them. He had to be fenced off. He almost threatened to leave them, and Moses convinced God to stay with the people, but he had to be fenced off from them, or he was going to judge them in the desert. And many of them, as we know, were judged in the desert and didn't make it out into the promised land. Jesus, as it were, says, I will stay in the desert and face the judgment of God. Let all these people go. When that happened, the temple veil is torn and God can continue to dwell with the people because one has stood out from the rest and said, I will face judgment. He was offered sour wine. This isn't a mocking gesture. Sometimes we think it was, but this was actually a refreshing drink enjoyed by everyone at the time. So this sour wine was something that laborers, agriculturalists would do. They would drink a little bit of sour wine. Apparently it's at times more refreshing than water. Now, this line here takes special attention of one of the centurions stood facing him, saw that he breathed his last, and said, truly this man was the Son of God. This almost, in a way, this is the climax. This line here is the climax of all of Mark. Mark 15:39. Because it's divinity finally seen in suffering. Jesus didn't reveal himself to this man. This man saw clearly that Jesus was God and saw it through suffering. And even still, even this person who's dying was truly God. This is the position we all need to come to. That though he doesn't show up as some sort of glorious king, though things are falling apart around us, truly this man was the Son of God. Divinity finally seen in suffering. And notice too, it doesn't come from a disciple. It comes from a Roman centurion. There were women, Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James, Salome. These women will make another appearance at the burial, and they will make another appearance at the resurrection. Before we get to them, the body of Jesus. Normally, the executed were further humiliated by being denied burial. So the Romans didn't stop at the humiliation of just crucifying you. They would also deny you burial. Your body would just be thrown in a pit. Well, Pilate's surprised to hear that he would have died. Normally, it could take 2 to 3 days to die from crucifixion. Joseph of Arimathea asked for the body. He's given it, and Jesus is preserved further humiliation by given a rich man's burial. Now, we saw the women witnessed the crucifixion, the women witnessed the burial, and we will see in chapter 16, it's the women who witnessed the resurrection. The primary witnesses to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ are women, not men. They are the first ones to see and proclaim the gospel. What is the gospel? That the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ for us. It was actually women who were the first witnesses to that. St. Paul's, Mark readers, chapter 16 tomorrow. We finish Mark the resurrection of Jesus. We sat with him through Good Friday. Be well. See you soon.